There is a wind that never sleeps on the high plateau, a dry, whispering breath that moves through the stones as if the mountain itself remembers. Beneath its restless sigh stands the ruins of an observatory, long forgotten by time. Its dome has crumbled, its walls bear the blackened scars of flame, and in its hollow heart sits a single table, carved from basalt, smooth from the touch of hands long turned to dust. Upon it rests a fragment of parchment, darkened by age and smoke, a map of the heavens, a map they tried to burn. The candle beside it flickers weakly, its light too small for the vastness of the night. A monk, wrapped in a robe the color of ash, leans over the parchment. His fingers tremble, not from age, but reverence. He traces the lines, faint constellations burned into the surface like ghosts of light. Outside, the wind hums softly against the broken stone, carrying grains of sand that once might have been stars themselves. He has heard the stories, passed in whispers across centuries, that there were once scholars who believed the sky held memory, that every empire, every fall of kings, every forgotten prayer was recorded in the rhythm of the stars. They charted those rhythms by candle and ink, seeing patterns where others saw only distance. They believed the heavens were not fixed but alive, a living script written by something greater than man. But kings do not favor stories that speak of their end. The chronicles say the order was simple. Burn the observatories, burn the scrolls, burn the sky from men's memory. And so they came, soldiers and priests together, carrying torches into halls of silence. The flames devoured parchment and wood, licking at domes of bronze until the very stars reflected in their surfaces seemed to shimmer in agony. Smoke rose into the night like a prayer turned to ash. Yet the sky did not change. The stars, patient and unbending, continued to shine. The monk imagines those final nights, the scholars watching as their work turned to smoke, knowing that what they sought could never truly be destroyed. For how does one burn the heavens? How does one silence light? He unrolls the parchment further, revealing symbols at its edge, faint sigils, almost erased. They do not match any known language. He's seen them before, carved into the lintel of the ruined gate outside. A pattern of circles and spirals, reminiscent of the star paths recorded in ancient Mesopotamian tablets. Those same clay records that spoke of the fire of heaven, a celestial event once said to have blinded half the known world. Some modern historians believe it was a meteor storm, the kind that sets the skies aflame, seen by frightened eyes as divine punishment. But to the monk, and to those who came before him, it was something more, a warning written in fire. The stars themselves remembering what humanity forgets. Some nights he would speak to himself as he worked. Every empire erases its own night, he would whisper. Every century writes over its shadows. Then he would dip his brush in the mixture of ash and oil and trace slow spirals across the parchment, marking the voids where light had once lived. He was not a recluse by nature, only by necessity. The scholars of the observatories mocked him, calling his work madness, a map of nothing, but he kept on unbothered, for he knew that what appears as nothing is often what binds the world together. One winter, a young sailor came to his door. She had heard tales of a man who could map the unseen, and she carried with her a relic, a shard of black glass said to have fallen from the sky. It was cold to the touch, yet when held near a flame, it shimmered faintly, revealing within it small pinpoints of light, constellations reversed, like a reflection in water. The cartographer turned it slowly in his hands. "Do you see?" he murmured. "Even the darkness keeps its stars." For months he studied the shard. He held it up to the sky, to moonlight, to the breath of dawn. And what he saw began to change him. The patterns within the glass shifted each night, rearranging themselves as if following some invisible rhythm. He realized that this was no ordinary fragment, but a remnant of a fallen map, a piece of the heavens that had once been burned away, now remembering itself. His work became fevered. He no longer slept. He painted through the hours when the city forgot its own reflection, when fog blurred the sea and only the sound of waves remained. On his walls, parchment after parchment filled with dark spirals, faint lines, and symbols drawn in pale gold. Together, they formed a vast shape, a single pattern that spanned centuries and silences alike. Those who saw it, few ever did, said it looked like a night sky turned inside out. The stars were black, the voids bright, a mirror world, a reversal. And then, one night, his candle burned down to its final flame. He leaned close over his last map, breath trembling, and whispered, "Now I see it. The light hides what the dark remembers." When morning came, the sailor returned, but the chamber was empty. The windows open. The sea mist drifted through, carrying faint specks of ash. The walls were bare, the maps gone. Every parchment vanished, as if drawn back into the night. Only the shard of glass remained on the table, glowing softly in the dawn. Scholars who later searched the archives found references to him in scattered journals. Always brief, always uncertain. One noted, "His maps did not end at the edge of the known world. They ended where remembrance began." Another wrote, "He charted absence as others charted continents. He exhales softly, and the candle trembles. For a moment, the light shifts, and the parchment glows, not with reflection, but as if the constellations themselves answer his gaze. Small points of faint luminescence pulse like distant hearts. His breath catches. Could the ink have been made from stardust? There are records of alchemists grinding meteorite fragments into pigment, believing they could paint the heavens back to truth. The people of the harbor sometimes claim that on certain nights, when fog drapes the water and the stars hide their faces, faint patterns of light appear on the sea's surface, shifting, vanishing, reappearing. Some say it is reflection. Others say it is the cartographer still working, still tracing the unlit paths between all things. The monk in the observatory keeps one of those fragments now, the last piece of glass from that forgotten chamber. When he holds it to the candle, it shows him no stars, only movement, slow, tidal, eternal. He finds comfort in that. Perhaps it is not the stars that guide us, but the spaces between them. Perhaps the dark is not our enemy, but our map. And somewhere, across the sea, under a sky without fire, the cartographer of shadows continues his work, painting what cannot be seen, naming what cannot be owned, listening for the stars that have forgotten how to shine. For even the night must have its historian. There was once a city carved into the side of a pale cliff, a labyrinth of terraces, towers, and narrow stairways spiraling upward toward the sky. It faced the ocean, but its people did not watch the tides. They watched the moon. Every window, every arch, every polished stone was angled toward its light. When the sun fell, and silver spilled across their walls, the city seemed to awaken. The sea turned to glass, the streets to ribbons of light, and from every rooftop rose a low, rhythmic hum, the sound of the city listening. He feels the echo of their faith, their defiance. How many gave their lives for these lights? How many nights did they spend mapping what no crown could own? Each line, each smudge, feels alive, as though the stars themselves sought to escape their bindings, to tell their story anew. They called themselves the listeners of the tides of heaven. Their ancestors believed that the moon was not a body of stone, but an ear vast, patient, and eternal. It heard the prayers of the earth, the weeping of rivers, the turning of stars. Its phases, they said, were responses, a slow language written in light. The waxing was breath, the waning, silence. The full moon was the moment of answer. Within the city's heart stood a round hall known as the Chamber of Echoes. Its ceiling was open to the sky, and its floor, a single slab of polished obsidian, reflected the moon perfectly, as if the heavens had descended into stone. On nights of fullness, the people gathered barefoot upon that black mirror. They spoke no words. They simply breathed together in stillness, waiting for the light to move. It was said that if the city grew too loud, if the noise of war or pride or commerce drowned the moon's whisper, she would turn her face away. And so they built their lives around silence. No bells rang. No markets cried. The sound of the ocean itself was softened by long wooden screens that broke the waves. The city lived in rhythm with the moon's breath, bright, dim, bright again, like a heart beating between worlds. But silence, too, can become its own kind of pride. When a new ruler rose, a man of iron will and quiet cruelty, he decreed that the moon's messages belonged to him alone. Only he could stand in the chamber on the full night. Only he could interpret her light. The city obeyed. For months, he stood beneath the open sky, waiting for the moon to speak. And one night she did, but not as he expected. When the moon reached her highest point, her reflection in the obsidian floor began to ripple. The air grew heavy, the ocean stilled. The ruler leaned closer, believing she whispered to him. But what rose from the reflection was not a voice. It was an image. The city, as seen from above, dark and silent. And then, one by one, its lights went out. He stumbled back. The moon dimmed, and for the first time in memory, her light vanished entirely. The people woke to darkness. The sea was black, the cliffs invisible. Days passed, and still the moon did not return. Crops failed. Birds fell silent. The chamber of echoes became a tomb of reflections that would not form. The ruler demanded sacrifices, desperate for light, but nothing came. Finally, an old woman, once keeper of the lunar archives, climbed the steps to the chamber. She carried with her a bowl of still water and a shard of mirror from her youth. She placed the bowl upon the obsidian floor and whispered, "You cannot own the light that listens." Then, with her bare hand, she cracked the mirror and let the pieces fall into the water. The moon returned that night. The monk rises and steps outside. The wind has quieted, leaving the plateau in a vast stillness. Above him, the sky unfolds, infinite, luminous, eternal. The constellations shimmer like old memories, each one a page turned by time, and in their quiet glow he sees it. The same pattern traced on the parchment, the same burning arc across the heavens. Not in the sky, but in the bowl, a soft, fractured glow. Each shard caught a fragment of her face. The light spread through the hall, and for the first time, the people saw what they had forgotten, that the moon's message was never singular. It was not a decree, but an echo, many reflections forming one. When morning came, the ruler was gone. Some say he drowned in the sea, searching for the moon's reflection. Others say he turned into dust beneath her gaze. Centuries have passed since then, and the city is now a ruin. The terraces are empty, the cliffs eroded by wind. Yet on nights of full moon, travelers along the coast report hearing a faint hum rising from the stone, like breath moving through a flute carved by the ocean. They say the ruins still listen. And when the moonlight strikes the obsidian fragments that remain, the reflections align, for a heartbeat, into a perfect circle of light. Then it fades, leaving only silence. The monk at the observatory once found a fragment of that same black stone in a trader's satchel. When he placed it on his palm beneath the moon, it grew faintly warm, as though remembering. He keeps it near his telescope now, and on certain nights, when the clouds drift apart, he swears he can hear something. Not sound, exactly, but the suggestion of it. Perhaps the moon does not shine. Perhaps she listens, and the light we see is only her reply. And so the story of that city lingers, a hymn of silence carried through stone and sea, reminding those who watch the night that even light has ears. Some echoes are not meant to be heard, only felt. High in the northern reaches, where the wind speaks in a tongue older than stone, there once stood an observatory no map dares mark. It was built upon a ridge so narrow that clouds passed through its corridors like ghosts, and its walls were said to hum with the pulse of the heavens. The scholars who lived there called it the House of the Silent Sky. But in the records of the empire below, it was known by another name, the Forbidden Observatory. Its origins were uncertain. Some said it had been built before the empire itself, when the first astronomers were still half-priests, half-poets, men and women who watched the skies not for navigation or war, but for the soft rhythm between the stars. Others whispered that it had no builder at all, that it rose by its own will, a monument to the sky's own memory. Whatever the truth, it stood alone among peaks of ice, its brass domes blackened by frost, its lenses staring forever upward. Perhaps the scholars were right. Perhaps the sky remembers. The scholars who kept it were bound by silence. They believed that words themselves distorted the purity of observation, that to name a star was to diminish its being. Instead, they recorded their findings through movement and light. Long exposures on glass plates, subtle vibrations of stringed instruments, faint ripples in pools of mercury that reflected the firmament like liquid night. But the empire below feared what it did not control. It had its own calendar of stars, sanctioned by priests, and each constellation was assigned to a law, each comet to a prophecy. To study the heavens outside those decrees was treason. Yet the House of the Silent Sky did just that. It charted what should not have existed, stars unrecorded, alignments unpermitted, patterns that contradicted the divine order. The empire sent warnings first, then spies, then soldiers. None returned. They said the mountains swallowed them, that the air thinned into silence so deep it erased even thought. So, for many years, the observatory was left alone, an invisible wound on the empire's map. Until one winter, when the empire's new ruler, a man obsessed with perfection, decreed that all knowledge must serve unity. The stars were to be recharted, rewritten, redefined to fit the empire's vision of the cosmos. And so a great purge began. Scrolls were seized, telescopes dismantled, lenses shattered. The forbidden ones were to be silenced. But the scholars of the house did not flee. Instead, they opened their shutters wide, inviting the empire's fire to meet the cold light of the stars. That night, something strange occurred. The sky shifted. Not subtly, not symbolically, the constellations themselves rearranged. Witnesses from valleys below claimed the heavens, turned like a wheel of glass. The familiar star patterns dissolved, replaced by new ones no astronomer had ever charted. It lasted only a moment. Then all was still. But when dawn came, the house of the silent sky was gone. Not destroyed, gone. No ruins, no smoke, no sound. Only a hollow imprint in the snow where its walls had once stood. The instruments, the scholars, even the brass domes had vanished, leaving behind only a faint, circular scar in the ice that shimmered faintly when touched by starlight. For centuries, travelers have sought that place, guided by rumor and dream. Some claim to have found it. A circle of warmth in the snow where compasses fail and voices fade to whispers. At its center, they say, stands a single object, a glass lens larger than any man, half buried in frost. When one peers into it, they see not their reflection, but a moving sky, stars that no longer exist, constellations that once were, burning faintly in impossible silence. Perhaps the scholars succeeded. Perhaps they mapped a heaven so precise that it became real, and the observatory passed through it. Not destroyed, but transformed, entering the very constellations it once sought to understand. He closes his eyes, and for a breathless moment, he feels the weight of all those who looked upward before him, the forgotten astronomers of Alexandria, the Chaldeans watching the ziggurats of Ur, the monks of the Pyrenees who measured comets in secret. Across millennia, their gazes converge here, in this single, trembling instant beneath the stars. The monk sometimes dreams of them. In his dreams, the sky bends, and he feels himself standing inside that vanished house. The air is clear, cold, weightless. The stars are close, impossibly close, their light soft and trembling, as though aware of being watched. He hears nothing, yet his chest vibrates with the hum of unseen strings, the same music the scholars once used to write the heavens in sound. When he wakes, the observatory's small window glows faintly blue, though the candle has long burned out. And for a moment he feels certain that somewhere, high above the clouds, the forbidden observatory still drifts, untethered, wordless, alive, a cathedral of silence orbiting the memory of light. Perhaps it was not forbidden after all. Perhaps it was freed. And the stars, remembering their witnesses, still whisper through the cold. Not to be heard, but to be found. Far to the south, beyond the edges of every ancient chart, the sea deepens into silence. Sailors call it the drowned mirror, a stretch of water so calm that the sky seems to sink into it, indistinguishable from its reflection. Somewhere beneath those motionless waves, they say, lies a temple built not for gods, but for memory, a place where stone remembers the stars. The candle within the ruins gutters out. The night deepens. The story begins with a storm. A merchant vessel, driven off course by lightning and fog, found itself adrift over an expanse of ocean that did not move. The sea was glass. The wind had vanished. Then, as the clouds broke, the moonlight revealed patterns shimmering beneath the surface. Delicate lines of pale gold, spiraling like constellations etched upon the ocean floor. The sailors, frightened and awed, lowered a lantern into the water. Its light fell upon pillars of coral and marble, upon stairways leading downward into the deep, and at the center, a vast circular mosaic. It was a map, not of the seas, nor of the earth, but of the sky. Divers who later followed their tale confirmed fragments of the legend. In that submerged chamber, reachable only when tides recede and moonlight aligns, there lies a ceiling of stone that reflects the heavens with impossible precision. Yet the stars it depicts are not our own. They belong to constellations no longer visible in any sky. Historians once thought it myth, but fragments recovered from sunken archives along the coast tell another story. They speak of a civilization known as the Selakians, a people who claimed to have followed the stars beneath the waves. They believed the heavens had once fallen, not in fire as others said, but in reflection. That when the world was young and the seas first formed, the stars cast their images into the water, and those reflections became maps, living diagrams of how time itself would flow. Their temple, the texts say, was not built beneath the ocean at first. It stood on an island that glowed with salt-white cliffs and freshwater springs. But the Selakians, seeking to understand the language of reflection, carved their temple deeper and deeper into the stone, until the sea, drawn by its own image, finally came to claim it. To them, drowning was not death. It was descent, an initiation into silence. They believed that beneath the surface, the true heavens waited, undistorted by the trembling of air or flame. When the empire that conquered their shores tried to erase their faith, the temple was sealed. Statues were toppled, names chiseled away, the sacred entrances buried under silt. Yet the sea remembered. The tides, in their endless rhythm, uncovered the door again and again, as if unwilling to forget. Centuries later, when explorers lowered lamps into its flooded halls, they found the mosaic still intact. It shimmered with the faint bioluminescence of ancient organisms that had taken root in its veins of gold. And when the divers' lights moved across it, the constellations themselves seemed to change, subtly shifting, realigning, reflecting the patterns of the modern sky as though alive. But on the horizon, a thin band of light stirs. Not dawn, not yet, but something softer. The stars shimmer brighter, as if aware of being seen. The monk whispers a prayer, not to any god of earth, but to the fire that lives within the sky itself. No one could explain it. Some said the stone responded to light, to the human gaze itself. Others believed it was not the stone that moved, but time, folding upon itself, allowing different eras of the heavens to appear like overlapping pages. When one diver resurfaced, gasping with awe, he claimed to have seen his own reflection not as he was, but as he would be, older, calm, already remembering what he had not yet lived. He never returned to the site. He said the sea had shown him too much. Now, in certain seasons, when the moon hangs low and the currents still, fishermen along those coasts speak of lights rising from the deep. Not the cold blue of phosphorus, but the warm gold of fire seen through water. They call it the breathing of the map. The monk has heard their stories. In his observatory, when clouds drift over the ocean and the air smells faintly of salt, he imagines that temple beneath the waves. He imagines its mosaics breathing softly in the dark, shifting with each tide, still tracing the patterns of forgotten stars. Perhaps, he thinks, the map was never meant to be read, but to be listened to, a slow, rhythmic hymn written in the pulse of the sea. He closes his eyes, and for a moment he feels it, the weightless drift, the cool silence, the faint glow of symbols older than light. and he wonders if every reflection is a memory, and every memory a reflection. Then perhaps the stars themselves are only the sea. Perhaps that is why they tried to burn it. Not to erase the heavens, but to forget their reflection within it. Remembering what it once was. When dawn breaks, the ocean returns to stillness. The world forgets. But far below, the map continues to move, gently, eternally, as if whispering to the stars above, I remember you. There once was a kingdom where no one was allowed to look up. By decree of the crown, the heavens belonged to the throne, and every star, every comet, every wandering light was declared sacred property of the king. It began with pride. The ruler, vast in ambition and shadowed by prophecy, sought to anchor his reign in eternity. If my power comes from heaven, he said, then heaven itself shall serve me. And so the royal astronomers were ordered to redraw the constellations. The old maps were burned. The stars were renamed after the king's victories, his bloodline, his sacred lineage. The sky became his mirror, a tapestry of conquest stitched in light. But there were those who remembered the older names, names whispered by shepherds and sailors, carried by wind and firelight. Names that spoke not of power, but of wonder. And among them was a young apprentice in the royal observatory, who saw too much and said too little. Each night, he climbed the spiral stairs to the tower where the king's astronomers charted their false heavens. He would watch them trace new constellations across parchment, erasing the dragon of the north, renaming the river of light, dividing the ancient crown into fragments. The stars, they said, must reflect the order of the kingdom. Bright at the center, dim at the edges, obedient, unmoving. Yet through his glass the apprentice saw otherwise. The heavens were not still. The stars wandered. Constellations breathed. There was disorder, beauty, and an ungoverned rhythm that defied the king's decree. So, in secret, he began to copy the sky as it truly was, night after night, line by trembling line. On scraps of parchment he hid beneath the floorboards. He called it the people's map. One night, while tracing the arc of a comet that moved against the king's new laws, he felt the air shift. The tower grew cold. Through the narrow window he saw a strange sight. The royal constellations, those newly invented patterns, flickering, rearranging, and finally dissolving into the true heavens beyond. It was as if the sky itself had grown weary of being renamed. For in the stars, we glimpse both our beginnings and our ends. The next morning he was taken. His secret maps discovered, his instruments smashed. The king ordered the boy's silence sealed forever. The observatory's great dome was closed, its glass covered in gold leaf to block the heavens from view. The people were told to keep their eyes to the ground. The light above is divine, the king's edict declared, and not for mortal gaze. But even gold cannot hold back starlight. The legend says that on the night of the boy's execution, a single star appeared directly above the palace, bright enough to cast shadows in the courtyards. The guards swore it pulsed like a heartbeat. Then, one by one, other stars began to brighten, forming not the king's constellations, but the old ones, the ones erased from memory. The dragon, the river, the crown, the sky reclaimed its name. And then came the sound. Not thunder, not wind. Something deeper, a low resonance that seemed to rise from the earth itself. The golden dome trembled. The palace torches blew out. And when dawn came, the dome was gone, melted into a perfect pool of gold in the courtyard, smooth as still water. The kingdom never recovered. The king, they say, went blind from staring at his reflection in that molten mirror. His astronomers scattered to the corners of the world, carrying with them fragments of the forbidden sky. And though his empire crumbled, his decree lived on, a warning written in silence. There are lights that do not belong to kings. Centuries later, when travelers crossed that land, they found the ruins of the palace half buried in sand. At its heart, they discovered the golden pool, still unbroken, still reflective. And when they looked into it, they did not see their faces. They saw the night sky, not above but below, infinite and clear, as though the heavens had moved underground. The monk sometimes dreams of that reflection. In his sleep, he stands beside the pool, watching constellations shimmer across its surface. They shift slowly, quietly, forming patterns that seem to breathe. And in the faint glow, he sees the shadow of a young boy, bent over a map, smiling faintly as if he, too, has seen what no one was meant to see. Perhaps the boy was not executed after all. Perhaps he became what he loved, another light in the forbidden sky, beyond the reach of crowns or laws. Now, each night, when the monk steps outside to adjust his telescope, he pauses before looking upward. He remembers that silence once ruled the heavens, that men once tried to claim the stars, and still they shine. And though the parchment may crumble, though the ink may fade, the sky remembers fire. No decree can bind the infinite. No king can own the dark. And perhaps the stars have learned to whisper more quietly now. Not to hide, but to protect those who still dare to listen. The sky forgives, but it never forgets. There is a story, older than any kingdom, about the night when the stars refused to shine. It began without warning. One evening, the shepherds who watched the plains noticed the heavens growing dim. Not with cloud, not with storm, but with something weightless, unseen. The constellations blinked once, then vanished, as if exhaled from the sky itself. Within hours, the world fell into a darkness deeper than any known to man. A darkness that swallowed horizon, fire, and faith alike. The chronicles of that age are sparse. Priests called it divine punishment. Poets called it mourning. Astronomers wrote nothing. Their lenses were useless. Their charts turned to emptiness. For a single night, the sky forgot its voice. But some records survived, carved not in parchment, but in memory. In the mountain monasteries of the East, there are accounts of a silence so vast that even thought seemed to stop. Bells refused to ring. Flames would not hold shape. Travelers could hear their own heartbeats echo against the air. It was not simply absence of sound. It was the stillness before creation, the pause between breaths of the universe itself. The old monks believed that every few thousand years, the cosmos draws inward to listen, that the stars retreat behind the veil to hear the echo of their own birth. They called it the night of listening. Others, more fearful, said the heavens had turned away, weary of the noise of men, of prayers shouted instead of whispered, of wars waged in the name of light. In the capital of the Western Empire, panic spread like wind. The emperor ordered torches lit on every tower, convinced the fire might coax the heavens back. For a moment, the world glowed with man-made light, trembling and fierce. But against the infinite dark, those flames looked small, as if mocking themselves. The sky did not answer. Somewhere above the dark, eternal silence, a single ember drifts across the void, patient, ancient, and endlessly watching. On the coast, where the sea mirrored the absence above, sailors dropped their anchors and waited. Without stars, there was no direction, no time. The ocean turned to ink. Some claimed they heard voices beneath the surface, low, slow, endless, like the sound of waves speaking in a forgotten tongue. But far from the cities, in a valley of salt and wind, a single child looked upward and smiled. She said the darkness was not empty. It shimmered, that if one waited long enough, faint shapes appeared, softer than breath, like stars seen through closed eyes. She called them the hidden ones. Her village did not believe her. They hid indoors, clutching lanterns, waiting for dawn. But dawn never came, not for 3 days and 3 nights. The horizon remained cold, colorless. The earth seemed to hold its breath. And then, on the 4th night, something changed. It began as a sound, not heard, but felt. A low hum, rising from the soil, vibrating through bones and stone. Animals stirred. Water trembled in bowls. The child walked outside and raised her face to the void. "It's singing," she whispered. Then came the light, not from above but from within. Tiny motes began to bloom in the darkness, soft, golden, moving like dust in slow wind. They rose from the earth, from rivers, from the air itself. millions of them, and as they rose, the stars returned. Not all at once, but one by one, in rhythm with that silent hum, as if being remembered into existence. The priests later wrote that the heavens forgave humanity that night. The philosophers said the cosmos had exhaled, releasing what it had held too long. But the monks of the silent order believed something else, that the stars had never truly left. They had only dimmed, retreating behind the veil of perception, waiting for the world to listen again. Perhaps that was the lesson. That silence, too, is a language, that the universe speaks most clearly when nothing else does. Now, centuries later, the monk at the observatory often steps outside on nights when the sky is cloudless and vast. He remembers that story as he stands among the wind and frost. Some nights, he swears he can hear it. That same low hum beneath the stillness, the faint vibration of a world remembering its own light. He imagines the stars breathing. He imagines the child who saw them first, her eyes open to what others feared, seeing not darkness, but the endless shimmer behind it. Perhaps that night was never a punishment. Perhaps it was mercy, the sky asking us to stop, to look, to listen. Perhaps it was never meant to be found. And when, at last, dawn returned to that long-ago world, it did not come with the sun. It came with a single star, rising slowly from the east, carrying in its glow the echo of all those that had vanished. The people fell to their knees. The child only smiled and said, "It was never gone. We just forgot how to see." Now, every silence holds that memory. The breath between heartbeats, the hush before sleep, the still pause between words. It is the same silence that once wrapped the world, reminding us that even when the sky goes dark, its light remains, waiting, patient, unseen. Some nights are not meant to end. They are meant to be remembered. Night has fallen again on the mountain. The wind moves softly through the broken stones of the observatory, carrying with it the scent of smoke, salt, and memory. The monk sits where he always has, beneath the cracked dome, beside the charred parchment, watching the candle's flame breathe in rhythm with the dark. The stars above are quiet tonight, not distant, not cold, only quiet. They shimmer like thoughts on the edge of waking. He feels their weight upon him, not as burden, but as remembrance. The sky has grown thin with time, and through its veil, he can almost see the shapes of those who came before. The astronomer who vanished into silence, the monks who sang their libraries into smoke, the cartographer who mapped what could not be seen, the city that listened to the moon, the king who outlawed the light, and the child who saw through the dark. All of them lights in the same constellation, drawn across centuries by the same question. What is the sky, if not a memory of fire? He touches the parchment again. Its edges crumble like dried leaves, but the lines, faint and gold, still shimmer when the flame bends toward them. It is not a map, not really. It is a reflection, the ashes of all who looked upward and dared to see differently. He remembers the stories he has read and the silences between them. The astronomer tracing his last line before being erased by the empire's decree. The monks singing to the pulse of comets before their voices turned to smoke. The star that fell twice, refusing to stay still. The cartographer painting with ash and dust until even darkness learned to glow. The moonlit city whispering to its reflection. The forbidden scholars who vanished into their own heaven. The sea breathing beneath the stars. The king blinded by his own light. And the night when the sky, weary of being misunderstood, closed its eyes. Beneath the endless dunes of a forgotten desert, where the horizon bends like a mirage and the silence has weight, there lies a buried shrine. Its stones are the color of twilight, half swallowed by centuries of sand. At its threshold, faint carvings still breathe beneath the dust, circles within circles, like orbits spiraling inward toward an unseen heart. All of it has led here to this moment, this solitary light. He realizes now that none of them were separate stories. Each was a fragment of one great, unbroken dream, the dream of light learning to listen to itself, the dream of human eyes trying to see beyond their own reflection. The wind moves through the observatory again, scattering ash across the parchment. For a heartbeat, it looks like the stars are moving, drifting across the table, alive once more. He watches them settle, forming a pattern he has never seen before. Not a map of the heavens, but of the earth, mountains, rivers, oceans, drawn in the same soft gold. The stars, it seems, are not above us, but within. He leans back and closes his eyes. The candle hums. Outside, the sky deepens. Somewhere in the distance, a storm gathers, the low growl of thunder like a memory trying to return. He thinks of how the ancient scholars said the universe was born not from light, but from sound, a single vibration expanding into everything that is. Maybe, he thinks, that is what the stars are still doing, singing quietly beneath all things. And maybe that is why silence feels holy, because it is not absence but the moment before music. When he opens his eyes again, the candle is nearly gone. The parchment glows softly in the dark, its lines pulsing faintly, like veins of molten gold. He understands now. This map was never meant to guide. It was meant to remind that no matter how many times fire comes, or kings forbid, or oceans drown, or stars vanish, light always returns. It does not fight. It remembers. It hides within those who look up and continues there, quietly burning. He lifts the parchment carefully and carries it to the window. Outside, the horizon glows with the first pale shimmer of dawn. The stars begin to fade, one by one, retreating into memory. He holds the map toward them, and for a moment, the lines on it seem to align with the sky itself. Every mark, every scar, every forgotten constellation finding its echo above. Then he lets it go. The parchment drifts into the wind, fragile as breath, glowing faintly as it rises. The candle dies. The dome fills with gray morning light. The locals call it Beit al-Najm, the house of the star. He watches until the last trace disappears into the horizon. There is no sadness, only stillness, the calm that follows a question finally released. In the silence that follows, he whispers to no one and to everything. The sky remembers. So must we. And as the sun breaks the edge of the mountain, the wind carries the ashes eastward, scattering them across valleys, over the sea, through the cities and deserts and ruins of all that came before. Perhaps someone, somewhere, will find a fragment of it again. A corner of burnt parchment with faint golden lines. They will hold it to the light, see it shimmer, and wonder what story it once told. And in that wondering, the map will begin to live again. Because no fire truly ends what was written in light. Because memory is another name for the sky. Some truths are not meant to be kept. They are meant to rise. And now, as the story fades, no one remembers who built it or why. Only that once, long ago, an astronomer entered its depths and never returned. Let the wind carry what remains. Close your eyes and feel the silence between the words, the same silence that once wrapped the heavens when the stars went dark. It is not emptiness you hear. It is remembrance. Somewhere, beyond the world of waking thought, the old observatory still stands. Its walls cracked, its candle flickering, its map rising and falling with each breath of night. The stars above, the same ones that burned through kings, through empires, through fire, now drift quietly beyond your window. They do not ask to be seen. He was not a mystic nor a priest, but a man of instruments and ink, of sky-worn eyes and sleepless nights. He sought to chart the heavens not as gods wrote them, but as they truly were, to measure their rhythm, to map their silence. He believed the stars were not eternal, that even light obeyed decay. And if that were true, then all empires, all suns, even the sacred firmament itself, would one day fade, only to be felt. The monk sleeps now, the ashes of the map resting on the wind. And the heavens continue their patient whisper, as if singing to those who dream. Breathe in the rhythm of the sky. Breathe out the weight of centuries. Let the story dissolve like smoke. Let the fire that once burned the stars warm the darkness behind your eyelids. You are safe. You are part of the remembering. His discovery came on a night of restless wind. A comet vast, red, and veiled in dust, cut across the firmament, its tail spanning half the known world. The astronomer, in trembling awe, marked its course. But as he did, he saw something that should not have been. The ancient constellation of the king's crown, symbol of his sovereign's divine rule, had vanished. One star dimmed, then another, then all. And as you drift toward sleep, imagine the map above you. Every star, every silence, every secret line of light, slowly aligning into one truth. Nothing that burns is ever truly lost. It only changes the way it shines. Now let the night hold you. Let the candle fade. Let the sky dream beneath you, and the wind turn your breath into starlight. The story is over. The court was told the heavens had blasphemed. But the silence continues its song. Fade out to soft strings and distant wind, then silence. The astronomer was accused of heresy, for to suggest the king's star could die was to whisper of mortal rule in celestial language. But in his final days, before the soldiers came, he worked in secret. Beneath the shrine's domed roof, he etched his discovery into a mosaic floor, not with ink or pigment, but with fragments of glass that caught moonlight like water. It was a mirror of the heavens, but inverted. Every star glowed from beneath, not above, as if he had charted the underside of creation itself. Those who entered after him said the air was strange inside. Cold, though no wind moved. The walls seemed to hum, faintly, as if remembering distant thunder. And when torches were lit, they burned blue. The legend says he completed his map on the last night before his arrest. When the guards arrived, they found only the mosaic and an open window facing the stars. His instruments lay scattered like bones, his parchment turned to ash. No body was ever found. Only a sentence scratched into the stone, so faint it could be mistaken for a shadow. The stars remember the ones who listen. Centuries passed. Sand buried the shrine. Empires rose and fell, each rewriting the heavens in their own image. And yet, in rare nights when lightning crawls across the desert without rain, the mosaic beneath the dunes is said to flicker faintly, as though the stars below still burn in defiance of those above. Scholars who later studied fragments of his story believed the astronomer may have been one of the last from a forgotten lineage, heirs to Babylonian skywatchers, to the keepers of who read omens not in the stars' light, but in their silence. They saw not what shone, but what disappeared. To them, the vanishing of light was revelation, the breath between creation and memory. And perhaps that was his curse, not the wrath of kings, but the burden of seeing too deeply. To measure the infinite is to invite madness. To glimpse mortality in the stars is to recognize it in oneself. In the dream quiet of the desert, the monk who now keeps the observatory sometimes imagines that lost astronomer, kneeling on the mosaic floor, whispering to the void above him. Perhaps he was not destroyed, but absorbed, drawn into the very constellations he sought to understand. Even now, when wind uncovers fragments of colored glass after storms, they glint briefly before the sun consumes them again. Blue, red, gold, small pieces of a sky that refuse to remain still. The desert is patient. It remembers the footsteps of those who looked up too long. And in the stillness between wind gusts, if one listens, the air seems to murmur, a low, rhythmic pulse, like breathing. Perhaps it is only the echo of the earth settling. Or perhaps it is the astronomer's curse, to look forever into the darkness, and find that the darkness looks back. And somewhere beneath the dunes, under miles of sand and time, the mosaic still waits, cold and perfect, its glass eyes turned upward, forever mirroring a sky that will one day forget even its own light. Some say when the last star fades, the mosaic will glow again, not in reflection, but in remembrance. Because some lights do not die, they simply change where they shine. Perhaps he was never meant to be found. There are ruins so quiet that even the wind seems to pause before entering. In the high valleys beyond the old kingdoms, where the air tastes faintly of metal and rain, one such ruin lies folded into the mountains. A monastery half-buried, its arches blackened, its stones veined with soot. The locals avoid it. They say that at night, the walls whisper when the fire returns in memory. They call it the Library of Ashes. It is said that once, before the age of conquest, monks came here not to pray, but to listen. They believed that the heavens had a pulse, that every star was part of a vast, breathing harmony, and that to hear it was to glimpse the architecture of creation itself. Their scriptures were written not in words, but in patterns of sound, the measured rhythm of bells, the echo of wind through stone chambers. To them, silence was sacred because it allowed the sky to speak. But their work was dangerous, for knowledge that does not serve power is often seen as threat. When the empire to the east declared itself the voice of heaven, no other music was permitted to echo. The monks refused to surrender their celestial chants. They kept their studies in secret, mapping the intervals between eclipses, tracing the alignment of planets through long winters of fog. Each new discovery, each fragile insight, they copied onto scrolls of pressed mulberry bark and sealed in wax, not to preserve their words, but to protect them from flame. And still the flames came. One winter night, under a sky streaked with comets, the soldiers arrived. They carried banners marked with the sun, a cruel irony. They dragged the monks into the courtyard and piled the scrolls high. The abbot begged for mercy, saying that no scripture written by man could capture what they had heard. It was only a reflection of light, a shadow of the divine. The captain did not answer. He only struck flint. Those who later found the ruins said the fire burned for 3 days. Smoke rolled down the valley like a living thing, filling the air with the scent of cedar and ink. The heat turned the stone arches red as embers, and when the flames died, the mountain snow turned black. Yet the strangest thing, amid the ashes, some scrolls did not burn. They were discovered years later by shepherds, their surfaces charred, their writing erased. But when light touched them, sunlight, moonlight, even the glow of a candle, faint traces appeared. Intricate constellations, drawn in pale gold. The marks were invisible until the warmth of light revealed them, as if the fire that was meant to destroy had instead rewritten them in secret flame. Scholars who examined them centuries later found patterns that mirrored astronomical records from lands thousands of miles away. The Mayan codices, the star diagrams of the Tang astronomers, the lunar calendars of Samarkand. It was as if all these civilizations, separated by oceans and time, had shared the same invisible language of light. And so the Library of Ashes was never truly lost. Transformed. Its words became stars. Its knowledge became smoke that lingered in the wind. Now, when night settles and the wind crosses the valley, travelers say the air flickers faintly, like the shimmer above a candle's breath. Some hear faint murmurs, the rhythm of a chant without language, a harmony beyond voice. Perhaps it is only the wind passing through the hollow windows. Perhaps it is memory, the echo of the monk's devotion, suspended in air too thin to forget. The monk who tends the distant observatory sometimes dreams of that place. In his dreams, he walks among the ruins, and ash clings to his hands like black snow. He finds the remnants of scrolls scattered like feathers, still warm. When he unrolls them, no words appear, only lines of light, moving slowly, like rivers seen from the sky. He follows them deeper into the darkness, and the air grows bright, as though the fire were still burning, but gently now, like the light of dawn. He wakes before reaching the heart of the ruin, always at the same moment. When the last candle flickers, and he realizes that perhaps the monks were not destroyed, only changed, transcribed into another form of existence, written in fire upon the fabric of night. It is said that when the wind is stillest, the mountain listens. And sometimes, when a traveler lights a lantern among those ruins, the flame bends, not away, but toward the walls, as if drawn by a memory older than stone. The fire that consumed knowledge could not consume the act of seeking it. The smoke rose, carrying questions too vast for words. Perhaps that is why the stars shimmer with a faint, trembling light, as if they still remember the ones who once dared to listen. And so the ruin remains, empty, but not silent, burned but not gone, a library written not on parchment or stone, but on the breath of those who refused to let the sky forget its song. Somewhere, In that unbroken silence between the flames and the stars, their voices still rise, not to be understood, but simply to be heard. Perhaps it was never meant to be read, only remembered. There is a temple on the edge of a forgotten land, a place where the mountains meet the sea and the air itself tastes of salt and rusted time. Its stones, worn smooth by centuries of wind, rise like broken ribs from the earth. Locals call it the House of the Fallen Eye. They say that once, a star came down from heaven and buried itself in the heart of that temple, burning brighter than 1,000 suns before falling silent forever. No one knows when it happened. The oldest chronicles speak of a light that bled, a celestial wound that tore the night apart. Shepherds saw the sky open like a mouth of fire, and sailors far off the coast swore the sea glowed red for days. When the light finally died, a crater remained, not of destruction, but of reverence. The people built their temple around it, not to worship what fell, but to protect it from the eyes of kings. Deep beneath that temple, past corridors carved with spirals and constellations, lies the object itself. A sphere of iron and glass, black as midnight, yet shimmering faintly within, as though it remembers the fire it once carried. Scholars have long argued over what it is. Some say it is a meteorite, an ancient stone from the cosmos. Others whisper that it is older than the stars, a remnant of something that fell before time began. In the early ages, astronomers from across empires came to study it. They called it lapis igneum, the stone of fire. They found metals within it unknown to their world, and patterns etched across its surface that mirrored constellations not visible in their skies. But the more they studied, the more uneasy they became. The stone seemed to change. Faint new lines appeared each time it was observed, as though the act of being seen altered it. When the empire's high priests learned of this, they declared it heresy. The heavens are eternal, they said. They do not change for man's gaze. Yet the astronomers insisted that the star itself was proof otherwise, that the sky was alive, breathing, evolving, that perhaps the divine was not distant and unchanging, but intimate and unstable, always falling, always becoming. And so the priests sealed the temple. They poured molten lead over its doors and silenced its scholars. The records were burned. The roads to the valley vanished beneath centuries of dust. But legend says that long after, in the time of empires forgotten even by ruin, the star fell again. Not from the sky this time, but from the memory of men. It began with small signs, maps that no longer marked its location, scriptures that once spoke of a second dawn, suddenly ending mid-sentence. Even the constellations above the temple changed. One bright star simply gone, as if plucked from the firmament. Travelers passing the coast at night swore they could see light shimmering beneath the water, like the echo of something submerged, restless, alive. Some say the temple sank with it, drawn downward by the weight of what it protected. Others say the people, fearing divine retribution, dismantled it stone by stone and cast each block into the sea, hoping to bury the memory of their defiance. But you cannot bury a falling star. It carries its own gravity, its own remembrance. To this day, fishermen claim that when the sea is calm and the moon hangs low, a red glow rises from beneath the waves, pulsing softly, like a heart still beating in the dark. The villagers, afraid, make offerings. Candles placed on small wooden boats, each one drifting silently until the current takes it into the glow. They call this ritual the second falling. A scholar once tried to retrieve it. He spoke of magnetic readings, of fields bending near the water's edge. He believed the star's material was not of this earth, that it held within it the record of the cosmos itself, written in light too dense to read. His ship disappeared before dawn. Only fragments of his journal washed ashore. The final entry, written in a shaking hand, read, "It is falling still." Perhaps that is the truth of it, that the star never stopped falling. Not from sky to earth, but through time itself. Each era catches a glimpse of its descent, mistaking that flicker for a beginning or an end. But beginnings and ends are illusions, and light, even when extinguished, carries memory. The monk, gazing through his cracked observatory lens, sometimes sees a faint red shimmer near the horizon. A heartbeat of light that is there one night, gone the next. He does not chart it. He only watches, wondering if it is the same star. Still descending, still searching for a place to rest. He imagines the sea floor glowing softly, an underwater cathedral where light sleeps and remembers what it once was. He imagines the silence it must hold, not the silence of death, but of waiting. And perhaps, when all the world's stars have faded and the sky grows quiet at last, that single ember will rise again, carrying with it the memory of both its falls, the one from heaven and the one from our hearts. The night deepens, waves murmur against forgotten stones, and somewhere far beneath them, the star that fell twice breathes softly, not gone, only resting. Some lights must fall twice to be remembered. There are men who map what they can see. Coastlines, mountains, and stars that burn steady across the night. And then there are others, rarer still, who dedicate their lives to mapping what refuses to be seen. In the old city by the sea, a labyrinth of narrow streets and salt-bitten stone, there lived one such man. He was known only as the cartographer of shadows. He worked in silence in a small chamber at the edge of the harbor, where the fog never quite lifted. His tools were unlike any other. Not compass or ruler, but dust, ash, and wine. His parchment was thin leather darkened by age, and when he painted, it seemed that the darkness itself obeyed him. Those who caught glimpses of his work said his maps shimmered faintly, as though lit from behind by something that had forgotten how to die. The city above him was loud, merchants shouting, ships creaking, bells tolling over tides, but within his chamber, time thickened. The air smelled of old ink and rain. He mapped by candlelight and he mapped what light could not touch. He called it the inverse sky. While others charted constellations of fire, he charted their absences, the stars erased from history, the heavens that had once been but were no longer seen. He believed that the darkness between stars was not empty, but full of memory, full of unspoken stories, full of everything the light had burned away.